Intelligence is often seen as an advantage, a trait that should make life easier, not harder. But for many highly intelligent people, the ability to connect with others seems more difficult, more frustrating, and sometimes even impossible. The irony is clear. Those who can think deeply, solve complex problems, and understand the world on a profound level often find themselves feeling isolated, disconnected, and misunderstood. Why does this happen? Shouldn't intelligence make relationships easier, not harder? The answer is not simple, but it is deeply rooted in how intelligence affects perception, communication, and the expectations we place on others. Highly intelligent people often see the world differently. They analyze, they question, they seek depth in everything. Conversations that others find enjoyable, small talk, social pleasantries, surface-level interactions, often feel empty, repetitive, or pointless. They crave depth, meaning, intellectual stimulation. But the reality is that most human interactions are not built for depth. They are built for connection, for ease, for social bonding, rather than intellectual debate. This creates an immediate disconnect. While others communicate for the sake of socializing, the intelligent person seeks understanding, truth, something real, and when they don't find it, they withdraw. Not because they don't want connection, but because shallow connection feels more lonely than being alone.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
This leads to frustration. The intelligent person begins to feel like an outsider, someone who operates on a different frequency. They wonder why others don't see the world as they do, why conversations feel forced, why they struggle to find people who truly understand them. But the mistake is assuming that intelligence alone should create connection. Connection is not about how much someone knows. It is about how much someone is willing to meet others where they are. And this is where many intelligent people struggle, not in their ability to understand others, but in their unwillingness to engage in the world as it is, rather than as they wish it to be. Another challenge is overthinking. Intelligence comes with heightened awareness of social dynamics, of unspoken rules, of the deeper meanings behind words and actions. While others navigate relationships instinctively, the intelligent person often analyzes every detail. They notice contradictions, inconsistencies, hidden motives. They see beyond what is said into what is implied, what is left unsaid. This makes it hard to trust, hard to relax, hard to simply be present in a conversation without dissecting it in real time. And when the mind is constantly analyzing, it creates distance. Instead of experiencing connection, they observe it. Instead of engaging, they evaluate. Instead of feeling, they think. But the biggest reason intelligent people struggle to connect is expectation. The more someone understands, the more they expect from others. They expect depth, honesty, intellectual curiosity. They expect others to care about truth, about logic, about self-awareness. And when these expectations are not met, disappointment follows. They begin to believe that most people are shallow, that meaningful relationships are rare, that true understanding is something only a few can achieve. But this belief is not reality. It is a filter, a lens that distorts human connection by measuring it against an impossible standard. The truth is that connection is not about intelligence. It is about presence. It is about meeting others where they are, not where we think they should be. The intelligent person must learn that depth is not something only found in intellectual conversations. It is found in laughter, in shared moments, in the simple act of being with someone without needing to analyze them. Connection is not an intellectual exercise, it is an emotional experience. And the more intelligence interferes with emotion, the harder connection becomes. But how does one overcome this? How does an intelligent person learn to connect in a world that often feels disconnected from them? The first step is acceptance. Accepting that most interactions will not be profound, that not every conversation needs to be meaningful, that connection is not about depth, it is about presence. The second step is curiosity. Instead of expecting others to meet their level of depth, the intelligent person must learn to be curious about others as they are. Everyone has something valuable to offer, even if it is not intellectual. True intelligence is not in seeing oneself as different, but in understanding that connection exists in many forms. The third step is letting go of constant analysis. Not every word needs to be dissected. Not every interaction needs to be evaluated. Sometimes the most meaningful moments happen when the mind is silent, when thought gives way to experience, when intelligence steps aside to allow emotion to lead. And finally, the most important step, vulnerability. Many intelligent people hide behind their intelligence because it feels safer than vulnerability. They use logic to shield themselves from rejection, from emotional risk, from the uncertainty of human connection. But connection requires openness. It requires the willingness to be seen not just as intelligent, but as human. And in the end, intelligence is not what creates connection. It is what must be set aside, even if just for a moment, to allow connection to happen. The paradox of intelligence, why understanding more can make life harder, not easier. Intelligence is often seen as a gift, an advantage that should make life smoother, decisions clearer, relationships easier. But the paradox is that the more one understands, the more one sees the complexity, the contradictions, the hidden layers that others overlook. This does not create clarity, it creates doubt. Instead of making life easier, intelligence often makes it more difficult by revealing problems that others are oblivious to, by exposing flaws in systems that others accept without question, by making it impossible to simply go along with things as they are. The intelligent mind is restless. It does not settle. It questions. It analyzes. It refuses to take things at face value. This is valuable when solving problems, but exhausting when trying to live. Because while others can find comfort in simple beliefs, in easy answers, in unquestioned traditions, the intelligent person is burdened with the need to understand. And the deeper they go, the more they realize how little can truly be known. This creates an existential weight, a sense of alienation from those who do not share the same need for depth. They see meaning where others see nothing. They sense patterns where others see randomness. They anticipate consequences that others ignore. This makes it hard to relate, hard to explain their thoughts, hard to engage in conversations that feel trivial compared to the vast complexity of what they see. And so, they retreat, not because they want to be alone, but because being surrounded by people who do not see what they see feels lonelier than solitude. This is the paradox of intelligence. It provides awareness but steals peace. It grants insight but creates distance. It allows one to understand others deeply but makes it difficult to be understood. It sharpens perception but blurs the ability to simply exist without overthinking. And the more intelligent a person is, the harder it becomes to escape this cycle. Every conversation is analyzed, every motive is questioned, every interaction is filtered through layers of thought that most people never consider. This is why intelligent people often struggle with anxiety, with indecision, with an inability to enjoy the present moment. The mind is always running, always calculating, always searching for a deeper truth, but some truths do not need to be found, they need to be lived. The mistake many intelligent people make is believing that understanding is the key to happiness, but happiness is not an intellectual pursuit. It is an emotional experience, and the more intelligence interferes with emotion, the harder happiness becomes. The solution is not to think less, it is to think differently. To use intelligence not as a barrier but as a bridge. To recognize when analysis is useful and when it is simply a way to avoid feeling. To understand that not every problem needs to be solved, not every action needs to be justified, not every moment needs to be dissected. Sometimes, the greatest intelligence is knowing when to let go. But letting go is difficult for the intelligent mind. It craves control, certainty, logical coherence, and human life offers none of these things. Love is not logical, relationships are not predictable, meaning is not something that can be proven, it is something that must be created. And this is where intelligence often becomes its own worst enemy. It seeks truth but struggles to accept that some truths are subjective. It desires connection but resists the vulnerability required to truly connect. It wants to understand everything but the deepest aspects of life, love, purpose, happiness, are not things to be understood, they are things to be experienced. And this is why intelligent people often struggle more than others. They see too much, they feel too deeply, they expect too much from both themselves and the world. They want everything to make sense, but life is not designed to be a puzzle that can be solved. It is an experience that must be lived, even when it feels uncertain, even when it feels imperfect, even when it does not align with logic. The challenge for the intelligent person is not to think less, but to think more openly, to allow themselves to engage with life as it is, not as they wish it to be, to accept that connection is not about finding someone who sees the world exactly as they do, but about finding someone who is willing to meet them halfway, to understand that sometimes the most profound moments are not found in intellectual debates, but in simple, unspoken moments of presence. The irony is that intelligence should, in theory, make all of this clear, and yet it is intelligence itself that complicates it. Because intelligence makes one aware of all the ways things can go wrong, all the ways people can misunderstand, all the ways emotions can cloud judgment, and so the intelligent person hesitates. They hold back, they analyze instead of acting, they protect themselves from the messiness of human interaction, believing it will save them from pain. But in doing so, they also shield themselves from joy, because joy, like love, like connection, is not something that can be perfectly understood. It is something that must be embraced even when it feels uncertain, even when it does not fit neatly into a logical framework. So what is the solution? How does an intelligent person learn to live without being trapped by their own mind? The first step is recognizing that intelligence is a tool, not an identity. It is something that can be applied when needed, but does not need to dominate every aspect of life. The second step is learning to be present. Instead of constantly analyzing the past or predicting the future, intelligence must be directed toward experiencing the now. The third step is embracing imperfection. Not everything needs to make sense, not every question needs an answer, not every interaction needs to be optimized for depth. Sometimes, life is simply about being, without the need to justify, explain, or understand. And the final step, the hardest step, is choosing connection over control, allowing oneself to be vulnerable, to engage with people as they are rather than as they should be, to accept that true connection is not found in intellectual compatibility, but in emotional openness. Because, in the end, intelligence is not what makes life meaningful. It is what allows one to appreciate meaning, but meaning itself is not a product of thought. It is a product of experience, and the greatest intelligence of all is knowing when to stop thinking and start living. Intelligence alone is not enough. It allows a person to analyze, to predict, to understand patterns that others miss, but without emotional wisdom, it becomes a curse rather than a gift. Many intelligent people find themselves alone, not because they lack social skills, not because they are incapable of connection, but because they have prioritized intellect over emotion, logic over feeling, control over vulnerability. They approach relationships the way they approach problems, to be solved, to be optimized, to be perfected. But human connection is not a formula. It is not something that can be dissected and reconstructed according to rational principles. It is messy, unpredictable, full of contradictions that do not fit neatly into any logical structure. And this is where intelligent people struggle. They want things to make sense, they want people to be consistent, emotions to be rational, relationships to be efficient, but emotions are not logical. People are not always consistent. Relationships are not efficient. They are difficult, frustrating, sometimes irrational. And yet they are the most important part of being human. But when intelligence is placed above everything else, emotions become something to control rather than something to experience. The intelligent person learns to suppress, to analyze feelings rather than feel them, to distance themselves from emotional chaos rather than embrace it. They mistake emotional detachment for strength, believing that being unaffected is the same as being in control. But in reality, emotional detachment is just another form of fear. The fear of being hurt, the fear of losing control, the fear of being vulnerable in a way that intellect cannot protect against. This is why intelligence without emotional wisdom leads to loneliness. It creates a barrier between the mind and the heart, between understanding and experiencing, between knowing and living. It makes a person capable of explaining emotions but incapable of truly feeling them. It makes them aware of social dynamics but unable to fully participate in them. It gives them the ability to see through illusions but prevents them from enjoying the beauty of imperfection. And the longer this pattern continues, the more isolated they become. They begin to see relationships as pointless, emotions as weaknesses, connection as an unnecessary distraction from intellectual pursuits. They convince themselves that they do not need others, that solitude is preferable, that misunderstanding is inevitable. But this is not a sign of intelligence, it is a sign of imbalance. Because intelligence alone does not create a fulfilling life. Without emotional connection, it becomes an endless loop of analysis without meaning, of thought without experience, of knowledge without wisdom. So how does one break free from this cycle? The first step is recognizing that emotions are not the enemy of intelligence. They are part of it. Emotional intelligence is just as important as intellectual intelligence, and suppressing emotions does not make a person stronger, it makes them incomplete. The second step is learning to experience rather than analyze. Instead of constantly questioning emotions, trying to rationalize every feeling, there must be a willingness to simply feel, to let emotions exist without needing to justify them, to experience connection without needing to fully understand it. The third step is embracing imperfection. People will never be entirely rational. Relationships will never be entirely logical. Love will never be something that can be fully explained. And that is not a flaw, it is what makes these things meaningful. The final step is vulnerability. Intelligence often acts as a shield, a way to protect against uncertainty, rejection, emotional pain. But real connection requires lowering that shield, allowing oneself to be seen not just as intelligent, but as human. It requires accepting that being open to connection means being open to hurt, that love is not something that can be controlled, that true intimacy comes not from intellectual compatibility, but from emotional openness. Breaking free from the loneliness of pure intellect does not mean thinking less. It means feeling more. It means allowing intelligence to serve life rather than control it. It means recognizing that the mind is powerful, but it is not enough on its own. A fulfilling life is not built on thought alone. It is built on experience, on connection, on the willingness to engage with life in all its messy, unpredictable, irrational beauty. And the greatest wisdom is not just knowing this, but living it.